the first time, the UN Security Council has voted in a non-binding agreement for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The United States abstained on a text that contained no condemnation of Hamas. It didn't explicitly link hostage release to a cessation of hostilities, but it didn't veto it. The text says, though, the fighting should stop for the month of Ramadan, which we're of course, about halfway through. Husam Zomlot is head of the Palestinian mission to the United Kingdom and joins me live in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. I wonder what difference, if any, you think this vote at the Security Council is going to have on the ground?
First, on the international order, because the international order has failed thus far for 6 months. And this is at least a step in the right direction for this order to begin reclaiming their own mandate. The Security Council was established by the community of nations after the horrors of the Second World War to do just that, to prevent wars. And it has failed thus far miserably. What we have seen was the unity of the international community today towards an immediate ceasefire after the atrocious, murderous campaign by Israel over the last 6 months or so. And therefore, it's a step in the right direction. And we already heard from the Israeli Prime Minister that he has cancelled a trip by his senior officials to Washington in protest. We already heard that Israel is not going to heed. So the question is, what now? How do we enforce? The issue is not an international law. Now, this resolution has become international law because this is the Security Council.
It's non-binding.
The issue is, no, there's nothing called non-binding.
Well, it's not. There's not a requirement on states to follow what it is that the UN Security Council.
You see, playing with words, Tom, doesn't help.
No, it's just the reality.
You are playing with words. Don't. International law is very clear. The Security Council is the highest organ of the international law. Any UN Security Council resolution is international law and binding, and therefore, why shouldn't it be binding? So, why do you think Israel is so angry at it? Because it knows the consequences should it not follow.
So Israel says that the fighting can stop once the hostages are released. This resolution decouples the release of hostages from a cessation in fighting. They say a cessation of fighting should happen now. Do you believe that Hamas is going to agree to a cessation of fighting without, they say, wanting many of the prisoners that are held in Israel back in Gaza?
I believe ceasefire has to stand on its own and is overdue for 6 months. Israel has not targeted Hamas over these 6 months, and you know the figures, Tom. 100,000 Palestinians now either
When you say Israel hasn't targeted Hamas?
Israel has targeted the Palestinian people. It has made Gaza unlivable. It has turned Gaza into the biggest open-air graveyard, quoting the EU foreign policy chief. And now you're talking about famine officially by UK government, officially, and international institutions. Gaza is in a state of famine. 2.3 million people are starving. So what this has got to do with Hamas? May I ask you? What this has got to do with Hamas? We must stop this.
Hamas is the genocidal authority in Gaza, who Israel say should not and cannot be allowed to have political rule over Gaza and military rule, ability in Gaza, given what happened not just on October the 7th, but before. That's what they say.
Let's talk about before then, Tom. I'm glad you mentioned before the 7th. Good that you mentioned this. What was happening before? I'm sure you've been following that Gaza has been...
before, there were various intifadas, including rockets being fired from Gaza into Israel. The stated aim of Hamas was a genocidal one, that they would happily see Israel wiped out, that they would happily murder all Jews.
Nobody wants to murder anybody.
Well, so that's Hamas.
I've seen one of your interviews with Michael Gove, and you were pressing Mr. Gove if he agrees that Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, are occupied territory. Remember that interview?
I do.
So you do consider the Palestinian territory to be militarily occupied, don't you?
UK law says that Palestine is an occupied territory.
It does. So does the international law. So it is occupied territory. Now, in such a situation, do you think the occupier, that is Israel, has the right to self-defense in such situation? I'll tell you what international law says clearly. Occupying powers do not have rights. They have obligations, responsibilities to protect the civilians under the military rule, to provide for them education, health, what have you. And the people under occupation, international law regulates the people under occupation have the right to resist.
But you're not going to deny that Hamas have genocidal aims.
No, what I'm going to deny you here is that stripping this whole thing out of context, starting from the 7th of October,
no one's starting from
not
the 7th
saying
of
as
October.
if you know.
I
Tom,
mentioned before.
But as if we just came out of a cave and we didn't know what happened over the last 6 months. Nobody told you, Tom, what happened over the